So my first question will be like, how do you define cybersecurity in your words?
Yeah, cybersecurity is about protecting value as it pertains to computers and information systems and network. It's actually quite simple. People overcomplicate it all the time.
Mhm,
The terms shift. Like at one time, like long time ago, we used to talk about data security, then
mhm.
information security. The term cyber or cybersecurity actually comes out of I think it comes out of the United States military, but it encompasses more than just information and data.
My next question, like, so nowadays there are like a couple of new terminologies. There are new teams actually. I can say there are like red team, blue team, the SOC team. Basically, I can say and there are like a couple of the teams. So how would you define those terminologies and about their work profile and their working structure? How do they work?
Yeah, so there's set of standard roles and
Hmm.
functions and departments, and they're common across lots of organizations. Now, in smaller ones, like let's go down to the small size. There is no IT,
Hmm.
or there's no security. There's maybe an IT person. That's very
Hmm.
small. Maybe there isn't even that. So the things get outsourced to a managed services provider. A lot of people come into this industry through managed services providers, and maybe there's a managed security services provider. Why? Because companies below a certain size, usually it's like maybe 300 people, 1 to 300 people. They can't justify full-time staff, and cloud and Office 365 and work from home and all that,
Hmm.
that it doesn't make sense to have your own staff, but you got to have somebody, so you outsource it. Those organizations become the IT and security team, and there are
Hmm.
opportunities for people to get work with them. They're really intense. They usually don't pay well. And if they're
Yeah.
24 hours, very oftentimes, like the easiest way to get a job at MSSP is be the night crew, right? The night crew is where a lot of people start. It's very hard to be night crew. Some of it love it. Some people love it. I've worked with people who are like, I only want to work nights because I can spend time with my family during the day, or maybe they just don't. Again, like there's some of us don't like people. Um, Other people want to come through the night shift and the weekend shift and then move to the day shift. Usually it takes a couple of years. But that's one way. So, and that's sort of a function, an outsourced function. Organizations, when they hit somewhere between 100 to 300 people, start having internal IT and eventually internal security. And this is where you have a thing called a security generalist. So the security generalist usually is limited to things like managing Active Directory, a lot of identity access management, maybe perimeter security if there's a physical location for the company. There's a lot of organizations have no physical location. Like I'm working one with right now. It has something like 500 people, global. They have an office. Nobody ever
Hmm.
works there, right? They have a Soho firewall of some kind, and that's it because they only use it for meetings. And for the most part, they don't even go over there for that. So those kinds of companies exist, and that's a change in the market. In terms of like big organization, you get above like 1,000, you're gonna have again like the security team, which is mostly going to be concerned with
Hmm.
account administration. And most security, by the way, is identity access management. It's not hacking. It's not intrusion analysis. It's not pen testing. It's not GRC. It's like provisioning accounts, deprovisioning accounts, changing
Okay.
access, stuff like that. Again, like a lot of people don't realize that Active Directory is a security product. It's a security product. Does some other stuff
Yeah.
too, right? But that's another really good way in. Why? It's important to the business, and it is extremely unsexy. Like people are not like climbing over the wall trying to like become the AD person. And
Hmm.
so it means that there's less competition, and it's also relatively easy to learn, right?
Hmm.
If I were to like pick a first job out of college, no experience role, I would
Hmm.
say be an AD admin, right? It will give you exposure to the company and all that stuff. I still don't think it's the best way in. I think the best way in is an office job, come through the business, but that's
Hmm.
not the only way. Um, there's this thing called the SOC, Security Operations Center. The job of the SOC is to be the watchers, to look for signs of attack.
Hmm.
That's one thing. That's what the SOC analyst does, or the SOC analysts do through various means. We can talk about that. There's also an engineering function within the SOC, and then coordination and management. So SOC will, and by the way, most of my work is in SOCs, going back again to late 90s and building in MSSPs and MDR. So this is my sweet spot. But a SOC will have analysts. They will have, a SOC will have typically an analyst lead, whose job it is to provide coaching and mentorship and things like that for the other analysts. The SOC will have a what I call an ops lead, who's responsible for managing tickets, for client relationships, for making sure that things are done on time in the right ways. Oftentimes, the SOC lead is also the person who leads incident response, or at least the first phase of it. Then there's a SOC manager or a SOC program manager, and they're on the business side. So you have these two roles. I'm sorry, and you also have engineers, like they're the the SIM people and things like that. They're responsible for tooling, content, rules, reports, all that jazz. The relationship between the SOC lead and SOC manager is one of the most interesting ones. There's one that a lot of people sort of aspire to, because those are roles where you have one role that's inward facing, that's the SOC lead, and then the SOC manager is outward facing. And these two people are kind of back-to-back partners in the team. And the job of the SOC manager is to get resources for the team, right? Get them stuff, get them budget, get them tooling, but also get them guidance and direction as to what the business needs. They're also there to run interference when things go wrong, right? And that's really important, because things do go wrong in SOCs. Hopefully not too often. Ops lead is there to make sure that things are happening internally, to understand what the analyst needs are, mediate, all that stuff, make sure everybody's happy, manage schedules, things like that. In the analyst part of it, there are two kind of architectures. There's an old architecture and a new one. The old architecture is, in the old architecture, and people will hear about like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. In that arrangement, triage, or the first point where alerts get raised, is tier 1. Tier 1 analysts work according to playbooks or runbooks, some kind of documentation exclusively. So you do just what the playbook says. If there's a case where the playbook says escalate, or if you don't know what to do, like if the playbook just breaks down, you send the work to tier 2. Tier 2 typically are the folks who write the playbooks. And they have their own looser playbooks. Maybe they have a looser, sort of more general guidance from tier 3 if you have that many people. Tier 3, they don't work according to playbook at all. Like oftentimes they don't write them, they don't use them. These are the people who, I heard this is Richard Baitlick said this. He's one of the great minds of the field. He said, a tier 3 analyst is somebody who I trust to talk to the CISO or the CEO or law enforcement or legal. Like those are the ones who have the whole thing. They tend to be really high paid, really mature, and they don't sleep much, but they're brilliant and they have a lot of fun in their own weird way. That is the multi-tiered SOC.
Oh, damn.
Right? It only works if in organizations that are big enough to have those roles across shifts to cover a 24-hour schedule, thanks to the fact that we have like 40 hours plus lunch schedules and the week is weird, right? You actually need weekends and stuff like that. Like heaven forbid somebody gets sick or want to like training. You need a minimum complement of 11 people. And even then you're only talking about like 1 or 2 people sometimes. And that's not good, especially if you're running a night shift. And so you can't have multiple tier SOCs if you have a minimum complement. A lot of companies they stop at like 7, because that's what you need to run like 5 by 10, 5 by 8. You can do it other ways, but it means for like really weird lifestyles. A lot of MSSPs do it that way. I've run shops where that happens. It's kind of miserable. Everybody's stressed out no matter what. The multi-tier SOCs sort of make sense when you get to about 20 people. It's a pretty big SOC. There's another model called the squad model. Maybe there are others. I'm only aware of 2. In a squad model, there are no tiers. There are functions. I mean, maybe there are tiers in terms of workflow, but in a squad, everybody does a little bit of triage. Everybody does a little bit of investigation. Everybody does, maybe you have specializations like malware analysis. I don't do malware analysis. My eyes aren't good. Like I see two of everything. I can't do malware analysis and I don't find it interesting. Some people like love malware. I know like hired people, brilliant people who like have malware zoos and they have like a rack of like systems that they can get pwned and things like that. You want specialists like that, but you don't need, you don't need everybody to do that, but you need people who can do a rudimentary amount of malware analysis. Threat hunting, there's nothing magical about threat hunting. It's actually really pretty simple. You just need a method. Everybody threat hunts. Engineers should do a little bit. The ops lead and even the manager should do some. Why? If the engineer never does any triage and they never do investigations, what happens is the content that they develop and the integrations that they do suck. They don't have any interest in improving the content or the integrations. They don't understand it. So everybody's got to do a little bit of that. The other thing is like most SOCs only have one engineer. Engineer wants to take vacation. Engineer gets sick. Engineer like wants to go to their like kids, like whatever. It's nighttime. Their phones doesn't work. Like, what do you do? Everybody needs to know a little engineering. And so squad is where like you spread the work around. They're way more fun. How do you scale that though? Right? The way you scale that is maybe the scale just depends on the kind of clients and the nature of the service. If it's one company, it's one company, right? If you're an MSSP, you get to the point where maybe you've got 50 or 75 or 100 clients. The squad is like a cell, like a single-celled animal, like an amoeba. You splice it. You take this half of the SOC and that half of the SOC, and you hire people into it, and you start with experience, right? And now you have two squads. And so that's like, in my mind, like that's the best way to do it. There's a security intelligence and security analysis problem that also shows up in the multi-tiered SOC. And that is this. Attackers don't want to be found, right? The first contact that the attacker has with the SOC is where in the traditional multi-tiered SOC? Which tier?
On like network level, as in I can go for like application level.
Like tier one. Tier one is the first person is going to see that alert.
SOC level 1.
SOC level
basically.
1. Who's the least experienced and least knowledgeable tier in the SOC? Level 1.
Basically level 1. Yeah.
That's level 1. So our adversary who doesn't want to be found, who wants to do us harm, and sometimes really knows their stuff, they're going to make their first contact with the least capable people in that organization. What kind of sense does that make? Right? But that's the traditional SOC. People doing that for like 20, 30 years. Why? Where does that model come from? Do you know where?
No, exactly.
Call centers. It's a call center model. I came from call centers as a lad. My first jobs were in call centers. And when I saw this, I'm like, this is exactly where this comes from. I knew it. Like you call like for your phone service, right? You say, hey, AT&T, like I need to talk to you about my bill. And they have a playbook. And if they can fix your billing problem with the playbook, they do. But if there's like some flag in there, one of them, by the way, is if the customer is irate, escalate to level 2 and tell them you're giving them to a manager. What happens? There's a little hack here I'm going to give you for you and your viewers. If you ever want to just get right past the level 1, you start the call, you say, this is my problem. Please log a ticket. Tell me the ticket number now. You write it down. You say, irate. Huh? They'll say, what? You'll say, I'm irate. They'll say, what do you mean? You'll say, you have an irate caller protocol that's supposed to escalate me to the next level. I'm irate.
Okay.
Right? Which means you're freaking out. You're mad. We all have protocols like this. What you're doing is just saying like, I don't really want to be a jerk to you. But just do what the caller's a jerk protocol says, right? And then we just go through this. because we're going to go there anyway, because otherwise I will get it right.
Yeah.
So they have that too. They go to level 2, level 3, then you might get a manager at that point, right? So again, like the thing though is that if I'm calling customer service, most of the time, I am not a malicious, adaptive, intelligent adversary. I'm malicious and I'm adaptive and intelligent, but I'm probably not malicious. I'm probably not going to mess with you. And I certainly am not calling to break into your stuff. Now, there's phishing, I know. But
Yeah.
I just want to get answers on my bill. I just want to know I was overcharged, or I want to order something. That's all it is. But you asked earlier, like, what's information security or what's cybersecurity? And I said it's about protecting value. That's not the whole story. The other part of the other sort of crucial element of that is that cybersecurity and security in general, by its very definition, always involves an intelligent, malicious adversary. If they're not malicious, if it's just a mistake, it's not security. It's just a screw up. If it's not intelligent, well, if it's not intelligent, you're probably looking at automation that was created by somebody who is intelligent, right? If it's not adaptive, it's a one and done, right? I mean, it goes on from there, but like the main thing is there's somebody on the other side of the internet or whatever who means to do us or our clients harm, sometimes both, right? If it's not those things, it doesn't belong to the SOC, it belongs to the NOC, right? The NOC deals with things, and this is useful because a lot of people, another way in is through the NOC. Those guys have important work, right? They do respectable things. Their job is performance availability, pretty much, right? Our job is performance availability, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, protecting those things in order to protect value. However, the business sees that, usually financial. But in their case, they're not interested in malicious adversaries. They're interested in screw ups. They're interested in things as breaking. They look at logs, alerts, and we look at the same logs and alerts sometimes and have a completely different perspective on them.
Okay.
Yeah, think about this example. Alert comes in from, I don't know, like your systems management tools, and say there's a server that has CPU pegged at 100%.
Yep.
NOC looks at that and thinks what they might draw, what conclusion they might draw from that.
Maybe it will be like some kind of just a normal query.
There's some out of control application, right? Probably what it is. Yeah, it's usually what's run. There's some process that's gone rogue. And what do you do then? Like a lot of the time, if it's Windows people will usually like reboot the system because they don't like to read logs. They're getting better at it. Unix and network people, we read logs. We love logs, right?
Yeah.
Windows people are like, reboot it. And then if it doesn't work, then they look at the logs. As a security person, because there's more to being a security person than being a security professional. It's like kind of a gene, like it's in you or it ain't. But we who do security, we'll look at that log and think, what hypotheses might we draw from that?
Basically a general structure about what exactly the things are going on behind the scenes.
Well, for one thing, we assume the possibility that someone is doing it on purpose. Now, if you see CPU pegged on a server these days, what are we usually going to guess? We're probably thinking about crypto mining, probably thinking about cryptojacking, either from an outsider. Sometimes it's an insider just trying to mine Bitcoin, trying to make some money. Sometimes it's an insider experimenting. They're not necessarily malicious exactly, but they're certainly flouting the rules. They've crossed the line.
Okay.
And I've seen this like lots lately. Over the past year or two, there's been lots of, 3 years, lots of crypto mining. Pretty much everything these days is business email compromise leading to wire fraud, malware or other host-based attack leading to ransomware, or crypto mining. Right now, there's less because cryptocurrencies are down. They go up, there's more crypto mining. So we look at, going back to the NOC, they look and go, out of control process, something's broken, right? Um,
Okay.
the SOC analyst looks at, and they probably think, I wonder if there's a crypto miner on there. I wonder how it got there. Where is the malware? Do I even trust that log? Is it there to distract me from something else? Right? Because we like false flags are a real thing. Like, yes, it's part of conspiracy theories too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, 9/11 wasn't fake. It was real thing. Okay. But in our world, false flags actually exist. I've seen them, I've experienced them, and we have to keep them in mind because bad guys don't want to be found, or at least they want to be found in the ways that we want to find them, right?
Yeah.
So there's a whole different way of looking at the evidence. In the knock world, if you have like, there's a SMP trap comes from a switch saying there's a port flapping going up and down. Knock people go, there's a port flapping. Let's replace the GBEC, right? Maybe reboot.
Okay.
Right. Security people look at that thing and go, who did that? Why did they did that? Did they mean to do
Yeah.
that? What could they get out of that? Is that a distraction? Did somebody figure out how to did they run an exploit against that switch to get access that they can get on the other side of that switch because it's being used as a firewall? Like, it's a much, much more difficult intellectual process. It involves more information. It also means that like the knock people don't necessarily need to know how the equipment works, really, because they're going to take that and they're going to report that to a subject matter expert, let them deal with it. Servers, other kinds of endpoints, switches, whatever. Their job is to just estimate the impact, kind of locate where the problem is as precisely as they can, get it to a SME. A lot of their job is like getting people out of bed in the middle of the night. Like, mad props to knock people, right? It's a hard job, but it's simpler. SOC people have to understand the context. Like, we need to understand the vulnerabilities that tend to be present on certain kinds of systems. We need to be up on the news. Like, one of the news sources that I pay a lot of attention to is the STANS Internet Center Stormcast. Why? They talk about vulnerabilities every night around 8 o'clock for 7 minutes. You listen to that thing, like you listen to that like Sunday night, you will get Monday's news. Right? That kind of thing is something we have to do. We have to think about like how people operate. We have to think about compliance, legal, like, again, what I was talking about at the beginning. Very different affair. And so you give that to somebody who's new. Like, this gets back to like what people say, like, how do I get a job, an entry-level job in the business? And they talk about the SOC jobs they apply for. Like, I'm sorry, like, the reality is I will never, ever hire somebody who's not worked in information security into a SOC position unless it's covering weekends and nights. Why? Because I can't. And even weekends and nights, it's like you're taking somebody and you're giving them support and you're saying like, hope nothing tricky happens. Really, because weekend and nights means you're calling the SOC lead all the time. You're calling one of your colleagues, right? And that's no good. So anyway.
I don't know. Need to just clarify some more things regarding what exactly does the blue team does and what exactly does the red team does.
Great question. Lots of confusion around, particularly the difference between red team and pen testing.
Yeah.
Blue team's easy. They're the defenders. And usually you're talking about the people who are working in a SOC or something like that. Red team, and there's some equivocation over like the difference between like red teaming and pen testing. I may like, some people are going to disagree with it. I don't care. Use whatever term you like. But to me, it's a question of scope and approach. It's more or less the same techniques and the same practices. Red teaming, I think, is a subset of penetration testing. If you have somebody doing a penetration test, it's not a call to red team. What you do is you define the scope according to whatever the business needs, and that scope is further determined by the capabilities and access and tooling of the pen tester. So it's really about, it's more creative, it's looser. Typically, like, there are more opportunities to find things. The problem is that those things are not necessarily likely to be closely correlated to what the threats are. In red teaming, you emulate or simulate a threat. This shows up a lot in category of technology called either breach attack simulation or BAS, or breach and attack emulation, BAE, which is unfortunately also the name of a big corporation that sells nukes. So it has problems. Yeah. So we call it BAS, even though it's realistically more like BAE.
Okay.
Companies in that category, by the way, the first big one was like, actually there was one a long time ago called Blade Logic, but it got bought by Symantec. It didn't go anywhere, didn't make it, but it was a great idea. More recently, Veridin, which got bought by FireEye. I think they got, I don't know if it's active anymore. The folks who started that went a company called Simulate, some friends of mine, super cool people. Attack IQ is another one. They happen to also have a thing called Attack IQ University, which is excellent if you want to learn about MITRE ATT&CK framework. Highly recommend it. It's free. And it's remarkably not oriented toward the product, most of it. RThreat, great little company, dev team in Mexico, founders out of Mexico, which makes it my favorite. Excellent technology and has some neat features I'm not going to go into here. And then there's like SafeBoot. So those are the big names. But start with RThreat, Attack IQ. They're my faves. So red teaming is where you simulate or emulate a threat. The way it works is you pick one somehow. Now it might come from a formal threat analysis. In my experience, that's the best way to decide what your simulation is about. Wall Street Journal, or whatever the business leaders are asking about. A lot of security investment shows up because either the company got popped, a lot of time by ransomware, a lot of time by an attacker that's findable. So they might know it was EMATAT, they might know it was QBot, right? QBot, I found out last night, is back and hot. Another, or maybe there was like a sister company, like CEOs, CFOs, COOs. They have friends in other companies. They may be parts of a portfolio company, and they talk. Most of my experience over the past few years has actually been in the private equity space, so where you have like a private equity firm, and they own maybe 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 companies. They all collaborate, right? Or at least share intel. And so like one company, one portfolio hears that a similar company in the portfolio got hit with QBot, right? So they're like, how do I make sure that my company is not vulnerable to this thing? Well, you could do a bunch of vulnerability scanning and take some guesses, or you could like go to the MITRE ATT&CK framework and like plug in the stuff on the layers, or what I used to cynically call a bingo card. I shouldn't have said that. It was mean because they're actually but it was stupid. Right. And I'm not apologizing to you. I'm just like, if
it's okay.
If MITRE people hear this, they may be like, what do you mean bingo card? I'm like, I'm sorry. You guys are great.
Oh,
yeah.
Understandable.
So,
No worries.
So you can go all through all that, or you can either hire people on for a red team exercise and or leverage breach attack simulation. So that's, and then like given current knowledge of the threat, the tools, techniques, and protocol procedures that they use, what your exposure looks like to that threat, like how susceptible you are to it. There's some problems with this actually having to do with timing, but we'll leave that alone for now. In a purple teaming exercise, which I'm sure is where this lands, it always lands on purple teaming these days. Purple teaming is, yes, it is the combination of purple and blue. This is true.
Red and blue. Red and blue.
Red and blue. Thank you. Yeah. What happens in a traditional red team or pen testing exercise is you don't tell the defenders that's going on.
Okay.
Sometimes there's good reasons for that. Sometimes what you want to do is you want to know if they could detect the exercise or not, and if so, what they're going to do without having been informed first. Usually it's a gotcha exercise and it turns kind of mean. And even if it wasn't intended that way, it tends to make for not good vibes. So the purple, and it also means that a lot of time, like the defenders don't really learn much, because the people on the red team or the penetration testing side don't prepare and act in a way that would enable them to communicate to the blue team what they did, how they did it, and what should have been picked up and how. So and by the way, Attack IQ has a wonderful course on this topic. I think it's called Foundations of Purple Teaming. Free, kick ass, comes a little shirt, you can put it on LinkedIn. Love it. It says nothing about their product, which is kind of remarkable. But anyway, in purple teaming, and I won't go into detail on it, but it looks something like this. The two leaders, like representative teams that get together, pick a threat scenario, pick a couple of threat scenarios, talk about what's going to happen and in what order and when sometimes. Schedule it. Maybe they don't tell everybody in the SOC. Maybe the first line people who are doing triage won't be told. Maybe they won't be told like all the details as they go. But what'll happen is the red teamers will do a thing that should elicit some kind of response and or be prevented or mitigated somehow by some tooling. And they'll say, hey, blue team, we just did something and we're not telling you what it is. Can you see something? And the blue team says, oh yeah, we saw that. And it looks like this. And they go, cool, you nailed it. Was it blocked? And they go, yep, that was blocked. Still got an alert, came into low priority, things are fine. Or like the people on the blue team side on the other extreme go, we don't see anything. Or we don't even know what to look for. And so the red team people might give them hints, right? So there's this cool, like back and forth interchange between the two, and it's good vibes, right? And everybody's working together and nobody's like trying to like catch somebody not looking. If I want to know, like, if like Jane is not paying attention, I don't have to run a purple team exercise and spend a bunch of dough, right? All I have to do is look at her tickets and like I look at her trouble tickets and I go, hey Jane, like I haven't seen any notes from you for 2 hours. Like, you okay? Which is always my first question. And Jane might say, yeah, I've been working on an incident for 2 hours. I'm like, what incident? Or, you know, like my network was down. I've been wondering the same thing. Why don't, like, the SIM isn't giving me some, there all sort of stuff like that. It has nothing to do with like people's intentions. It's just like stuff breaks. I think life happens. Anyway, did I answer that question adequately?
Yeah, that was the one. And yeah, there are like more two to three questions, last 2 to 3 questions, and then we'll be order. So they're like, what are the industry standards means we should be being followed in terms of like one common person should be knowing of, like in terms of security aspect.
Well, actually, before you get to security, you got to know a couple of, there's some basics that I see a lot of people don't know. Got to know TCP/IP. You got to know how to read packets. Not because you're necessarily going to read packets. Like network traffic analysis has its purposes, but they're less and less common as you see more encryption on the wire and you see faster and faster networks and fewer choke points. You need to understand basic packet analysis because it will help you understand firewall rules and network IDS and things like that. A lot of it has to do with knowing which direction the traffic is going in and if it looks well formed or not. If you don't know TCP/IP at a certain level, you're going to have a really hard time. You're also not going to be able to communicate with network people, and they will notice and they'll complain.
All right. All right. Yep.
You know,
all right. Yep.
A little hint, and this is from my interview list. And I'm going to have to stop using it because people know it. RFC 1918. Know that RFC. Read it. It's not long. RFC 19 is the internet, is the non-routable internet, or non-routable TCP/IP addresses. So you should never see them on the internet. A lot of people don't know that. It's basic, right? RFC 822. It's about SMTP. There are a few others that are actually, RFCs are really fun to read. Some of them are funny. So there's that. Knowing how Linux works, like by hand. I don't mean Kali. Like Kali is Linux with like training wheels. In fact, you want to know pen testing, and you want to start there. Fine. I think it's a bad idea, but some people it's like the best thing. Like I'm not going to say it's like a terrible idea, but don't use Kali to do it. Start with like Arch Linux. Start with a distro that forces you to struggle with configuring a kernel. Right? Do as much on command line as you can. Get used to VI or Vim. Don't use Nano. Learn VI. Like, be an adult. Like, Nano's for kids. Love Nano, like, for some things. Like, and if you're like not a Linux power user and you don't need to know system administration, Nano's great. But if you're going to do security for a living, you need to know how to administer a system. And don't just stop at the security tools. Learn how to configure like Nginx, Apache. People still use it, I guess. Mostly it's Nginx out there. Learn how to configure bind for DNS. Learn how to configure like that stuff. It will teach you an awful lot about how things work when they're not being broken. The other thing is, if you pop the Linux box, you see this all the time. It's like, okay, you're rid of the box. Now what, pal? Like, what are you doing next? And you see people like, I don't know, I have root. I'm like, well, that's lovely.
It's like cornered up straight away and done.
Exactly. Do you know how like the find tool works? Do you know how sed and awk works so that you can look through files like that? And people don't know. So, but if you learn the basics first, then, well, got good news for you. There's a good chance that you won't be a script kiddie for your whole life. And by the way, being a script kiddie is fine, except it's not. Right? The other thing,
like
yeah, same thing goes for Windows. You got to know, you need to know how like Windows desktop operating systems work, or end user operating systems. You need to know something about how the servers work. You need to understand how Active Directory and Azure Active Directory work. You must know how cloud works. Simplest, and that actually makes things simpler, because you can start, like, the path to cloud is better laid out, because a lot of people are new to it. Like, you know, cloud for most of us is new. Like, particularly security people were extremely late to the cloud, like really late. And so even people who've been doing security for 10, 20, 30 years, most of us really only got serious about cloud like 5 years ago. Some of us still don't get cloud. AMG have introductory certifications for their stuff, relatively cheap, easy to get stuff. If you're on LinkedIn and you've got LinkedIn, like the LinkedIn training or LinkedIn learning or whatever, there's really good training available. Get some books, blah, blah, blah. But you got to know cloud. And then you're ready to start doing security, right? But only then. And it takes a long time to learn this. So, I mean, I don't think I exactly got your question. I didn't give you the security stuff, but it will show. So like I said earlier, like most security is about identity, particularly in cloud. Like cloud is like 99% identity. In cloud, the perimeter is the identity, as they say. When we talk about zero trust, we're talking about three things we're trusting: identity, the application you're going to, and the endpoint that you're on. So like the two endpoints, like my laptop, got to be able to protect that. Got to trust that laptop. Got to trust that I'm going to an application that is trustworthy, and my identity has to be protected. Like all three need to agree. Work from home makes it a little weird because people want to use like BYOD, which I have friends who are like, sure, you can do BYOD with that. There's like Google stuff. I'm like, not my opinion. So identity just doesn't get the attention that pen testing intrusion analysis do.
Okay.